Hello, this is Craig Wesco recording for tcgplayer.com, and today we're going to play this red-green Ponza deck, also known as Gruel Land Death or Gruel Land Loss, whatever you want to call it. It's been popping up and doing well in some mostly Magic Online tournaments for the past couple months, and I haven't actually taken it for a test drive until today. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. It's kind of a reminiscent deck of back when Magic began. You have turn 1 Bird of Paradise or the new and improved Llanowar Elf. It's cast turn 2 Stone Rain, which was basically, the way red-green land destruction was in the beginning. So it kind of has that same theme, which in Modern there's a lot of decks that are based around lands. So we saw Oliver 2 went 4-0 in the Modern portion of Worlds with a Valakut Titan deck. So I expect that to be even more popular than it's been. There's also Scape Shift decks, which this is, attacking their lands is pretty reasonable. And also against decks like Tron. I think attacking their mana is the best way to go against that deck. And then a lot of the decks, even if they're not revolving around getting a particular amount of lands in play, like Valakut and Tron are, they're also just called to Blood Moon. So there's a lot of 3-color decks like Jund, Abzan. Literally, I think 8 players out of the 24 at Worlds were playing Abzan, and so Blood Moon is just very good against that. If they don't have Abrupt Decay mana untapped when you cast it, they're in trouble, and we have 10 turn 1 mana accelerants, so we could accelerate into a turn 2 Blood Moon. So if we're on the play, I mean, they have to have a turn 1 discard spell, or they're basically just locked out of the game. And so that's true of a lot of decks in the format. They're just really cold to Blood Moon. So this deck is a part Blood Moon deck, part Land Destruction deck, and part Ramp deck. So the ramp capability is also interesting. We obviously have the 10 1-mana accelerants, but then we also have cards like Mulan Voli Acid Moss, or however that's pronounced, which will actually ramp us while taking the opponent down a land. So if they have 2 lands on the battlefield, and we have 2 and like a Utopia Sprawl, an Arbor Elf or whatever, we go up to 3 lands and they go down to 1. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of like a Stone Rain that also rampant growths, which can ramp us into all these cool cards up here. So the most important one is Inferno Titan. So Inferno Titan is not only a threat that'll win the game in a couple of turns by itself, it also has an important capability of affecting the board by killing creatures. So it deals 3 damage divided as you choose, so it's like an arc lightning when you play it. And the most important thing it does is it'll kill mana creatures. So it'll kill Noble Hierarchs, it'll kill Birds of Paradise, it'll kill all the creatures that produce mana. Because if we're attacking the opponent's lands and playing a Blood Moon, their only way to sort of combat that and still cast their spells is going to be with creatures that produce mana, like little 1-mana Noble Hierarch type cards. And so Inferno Titan just cleans all that up, and Bonfire of the Damned also cleans that up in a way that doesn't also kill our Arbor Elves and Birds of Paradise, because it only hits the opponent's creatures. And since we are a ramp deck, we have all this mana that we can, ramp up to. It's not inconceivable to just like cast a Bonfire for 7 mana or something and just deal 3 to all the opponent's creatures. So Bonfire's the sort of the sweeper spell of choice in this deck. Then you could also just rip it off the top of your library and cast it for the Miracle, which, is just awesome when it comes up, unless you're, LSV or Kibler, then it just ruins your day. But at least you get a meme made after you. So there is that. And Inferno Titan is kind of like a Bonfire with a 6/6 attached to it that bonfires again the next turn. So this guy's just awesome in this deck. And then this middle part of the curve is kind of where there's some disparity between deck lists, like which cards you run. Do you run Obstinate Baloth, or do you run Kitchen Finks? Do you run Thrun main, or do you just run them in the sideboard? Super good against a lot of decks right now. But kind of lackluster in some other matchups. It's basically a 4/4 if they're not trying to target him. Thragtusk, super good, gains life, wins attrition battles against Jund Abzan type decks. Batterskull, a reusable way to gain life and a big threat, but it's your only artifact, so it has a target on its back. Stormbreath Dragon hits real hard, real fast, flies, can't be path to exiled. Craig Wesco's Nightmare, all those cool things going for it. We have Chandra Pyromaster, which I particularly like because it does almost like what we're trying to get out of the Bonfire and the Inferno Titan. It'll ping off little mana dorks, or it can basically be a card draw spell every turn. So if you want a Dark Confidant, then it's basically a Dark Confidant where you're just drawing an extra card every turn. And if instead you want a way to ping off the opponent's mana creatures, it's a card that pings off the opponent's mana creatures. And you get to decide each turn which one you want it to be. So again, like these cards in the middle are kind of, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to play. But the staples of the deck are the 10 1-mana accelerants, the 4 Inferno Titans, and then these land destruction spells in the middle. So Stone Rain, Acid Moss. Some people run all 4 Blood Moons main, which I'm certainly not opposed to, but I wanted to test out a lot of these cards that are kind of one-ofs in this deck. So a lot of people are playing 3 main, 1 sideboard, so I just went with that. If the tournament was tomorrow, I'd probably play all 4 main, just because I really want it in a lot of matchups. And then Beast Within is another interesting card. So it can function as a land destruction spell. So it's just destroy target permanent, so you just be like, alright, kill your land, you get a 3/3. Against a lot of boards, giving the opponent a 3/3 isn't super relevant, because we could have one of these 4/4s on the battlefield to brick it. Any of our other creatures are big enough to brick it. Inferno Titan can kill it when it attacks, so you can be like, okay, end step, kill your land, untap, Inferno Titan, kill your 3/3 that I gave you. But it also shuts off other kind of important cards. So it can kill a creature if there's a problematic creature. It can kill an enchantment, an artifact. If the opponent plays a Crucible of Worlds, that could kind of be problematic for our land destruction plans. We might want to kill that. It's just, it's not a 4-of. It's not the card we want to cast on turn 2. We'd rather cast Stone Rain. But, it's between this and something like Molten Rain. And then another card that people run sometimes in this deck is Goblin Dark Dwellers, because you can Dark Dwellers and rebuy a Stone Rain, or like a Beast Within. So if we have more cards like Molten Rain, I'm inclined to play that, but we don't really have a lot of targets for it. Boom Bust would be another card you could run, because then you Dark Dwellers it, and it's just straight bust Armageddon. But we're kind of on the plan of we want to kill their lands individually. Yeah, so that's the main deck. And then we have 1 Kessig Wolf run, just, because it's cool. And we don't need a threat necessarily to win. If we just, we just have a random Bird of Paradise or an Arbor Elf, and we just have a bunch of mana, maybe a forest with double Sprawl on it, we could just Kessig Wolf run, give my bird plus 6/0 until end of turn, just kill you with that. And so the sideboard, there's a few cards that are very important. So I think Ancient Grudge is an important card against Affinity. So we could run a card like Shatterstorm, which functions, or Creeping Corrosion, which functions really well against, Lantern, Affinity, those kinds of decks. I chose Ancient Grudge mostly because it also has utility against decks that just run a couple of artifacts that we need to kill. So like a Crucible of Worlds, we just want to be able to kill that, so we'll bring, an Ancient Grudge in. Sometimes we just want to kill an Ether Vial, because Ether Vial, they can still play out all their creatures even if we're killing all their lands. So we want to be able to kill the Ancient Grudge, or kill the Vial, so we want Ancient Grudge. We don't want to bring in like Shatterstorm to deal with Ether Vial. We'd rather just draw a grudge the Vial. If they play another Vial, we kill that one too. So the Ancient Grudge is important. Sudden Shock is a way to, it kills mana creatures, but it could also kill anything that's just like, have to kill that right away. And they can't respond with any shenanigans. The fourth Blood Moon, if it's not main deck, it should definitely be in the sideboard. It's our best card in a lot of matchups. Anger of the Gods. I could run, say, the fourth Bonfire in the sideboard, but I feel like the matchups where we really want a sweeper, Anger of the Gods is generally better. So against Elves, against Affinity, against Merfolk, against any deck where they're just like trying to flood the board with a bunch of threats, then we could just sandbag our elf or our bird, or if we're on the draw, maybe we want to cast turn 1 bird, turn 2 anger if they're, some elf deck on the play going crazy. So we want some kind of sweeper in our board. We went with anger. It could also take out all the opponents like Voice and Kitchen Finks and Bird of Paradise if they're like a Darwin Evolution deck, something like that. Kitchen Finks is our concession to burn, mostly, but also can be good against these mid-range Jund, Jeskai, Abzan type decks. So it'll gain us some life, it'll be relevant in the attrition fights. It's possible that this is better as more copies of Obstinate Baloth. Not quite sure about that yet. Spellskite is an answer to a deck like Infect. So Infect is pumping their guys, doesn't need a whole lot of mana to operate, and so if we have a card like Spellskite, that could buy us a lot of time and potentially keep us from getting Giant Growth out of the game. Also against like Death Shadow decks that are trying to become immense, team or battle rage us, a Spellskite will keep that from happening, and it can also just block a Wild Nacatl for a while against that deck. So it's a good sideboard card in that matchup. And then Thrun, great in all the mid-range matchups. Kind of like Kitchen Finks, but even more threatening against decks like Jeskai. They just can't deal with it and they just lose to it. So we want a second copy of that. And then Relic of Progenitus is just, I don't know, like an answer to graveyards. Bring it in against Tarmogoyf Grimflayer decks, against Snapcaster Mage decks. We don't really have any dedicated graveyard hate against Dredge, so that could be maybe problematic. We could run maybe Grafdigger's Cage for that matchup, but I'm just kind of hoping to dodge it, I guess, with this. If we wanted to, we could maybe replace Sudden Shocks and Relic with like 3 cages or something, but I don't know. So that's the deck. It's basically this sweet land destruction deck with Inferno Titan, Bonfire, and a bunch of mana accelerants. Let's see how it goes. It's a deck I'm looking forward to playing.